There's a 60% chance more likely to close the transaction if there's a qualified TC on the file in a creative transaction specifically, because they are so complex.
We have here Molly Tennant, a huge transaction coordinator specialist. I mean, she owns a company that she's partnered with, Pace Morby, probably does more transaction volume than any other TC in the country.
It's not for everyone. It is really difficult, right? And I know it makes you sick probably to think about the work that a transaction coordinator does, because it's the minutia. You're in the weeds, you're in all of the problems, you're expected to solve all the things, you're expected to know all the answers, and you're expected to communicate everybody in a timely manner when you're doing 500 things all at the same time.
This is why you have the success that you do, because you show up anytime, any place, always fully intention, and you're just, I mean, you're a beast at what you do. You're really, really, really hard worker.
What people who are devaluing transaction coordinators, in other words, they don't necessarily see the value, don't understand, is that in order for you to scale and grow, you have to sort of be chaotic.
Molly, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm super stoked. We chatted just a little bit before this, you guys, and I had no idea that you go back with Pace. I should know. Pace knows everybody. So it is always nice to meet people in the industry all across the country, because I'm here in Arizona.
I love it. I love it. You guys are obviously Phoenix. The Arizona market is a super competitive market. It's been that way for a very, very long time, probably since I got in the business in 2017. I have a bunch of really good friends in Phoenix, and I always have a good time in Phoenix. So
it's a good market to be in. I will say Florida is not my favorite market. So I'm sorry for those of you that are in Florida. Insurance and contractors, I feel like I want to pull my hair out every time we do a deal in Florida.
Yeah, Florida. So let me be clear. So Northern Florida and Southern Florida should be two different states as far as I'm concerned. It's completely different. South Florida is, at this point, it should be its own country. And even though I'm from South Florida, so I can say that, Northern Florida is like actually America, and it's a totally different place, right?
Yeah, I think our houses are somewhere we do have Southern Florida, so like West Palm Beach. That's Southern, right?
Yeah, South Florida. Yeah.
Yeah. And then we have some properties in the Lake Worth, similar area.
That's Palm Beach, yeah.
Yeah. So
we consider South Florida the Tri-County, which is Palm Beach County, Broward County, and Miami-Dade County. Obviously, right. Miami being the furthest south, but it changes drastically from Miami-Dade to West Palm, as you probably know. So yeah, it's very different.
It is rough, man. I'll have to contact you after this, because I've had some really hard projects out there for sure.
Send me, listen, I came up in the business in this market, so I get it. Once I started traveling to masterminds around the country, you don't realize how different this market is until you get out and you just see, you're like, wow, you guys don't deal with that? No kidding, you know?
Yeah, like Arizona is a breeze as far as I'm concerned. I don't have anywhere near the problems at all.
We have a lot of, speaking of like transaction coordinating and all that, but like we have a lot of like title issues and very hairy deals. I don't know why, but it's very common here. A lot of property issues in terms of like physical violations and stuff like that. And
yes.
Yeah, we have a lot of
violations. I see that a lot on title reports. You know what's interesting is coming from West Coast to East Coast, speaking of transactions, when you pull a title report on the West Coast, it takes 2 weeks. It takes a while. On the East Coast, it takes a while. Every time I'm on the East Coast, title reports take forever. You come over here, I can get a title report in 2 days.
Yeah. So you're talking about the actual title commitment?
Yes.
Yeah. So our attorney can do it in about 48 hours because we have a great relationship with him, with the underwriters. But lien searches, now that's a whole different game. Down here, every municipality is its own Wild West. They don't care. Most of them don't have rush options. So they're like, hey, could be up to 30 days. And you're just kind of like, okay. Cool. Yeah.
That's so bizarre. So this is the beauty of working all across the country, right? Is that I get to see all these different aspects. And it's funny when you talk to people who don't work in other markets and they're like, oh, I just thought that was normal. I didn't think that was odd. So then when we have students like in Pace's communities and they come to us as transaction coordinators and they're like, hey, I have a contract that's supposed to close in 5 days on the East Coast. I'm like, we might need to extend that. I'm going to have to call over to whoever's pulling our title report and our lien searches and see if they can even get that done, if that's even possible. Otherwise, you're going to be closing without knowing any of that information.
Oh yeah. When people like, we do a lot of JVs, and people bring me deals, my team deals all the time. And they're like, oh yeah, we got to close in 7 days. I'm like, yeah, it better be a steal.
I discourage people so much from negotiating from that standpoint, though. Like, it really shouldn't give you that much more leverage. Everyone should want to have the peace of mind that everyone had enough time to do their job correctly, including the person who's manually doing that lien search for you. You don't want to rush that process.
No.
You want to make sure they get everything done efficiently and so that you can close. And there's always mistakes made when you try and rush a closing, every single time.
Agreed. For me, when I was first coming into the business, I had a mentor. He was really good at finding hairy, complex title issues and figuring them out. But the way that he taught me was to negotiate super low discounts or buying the deed. I'm notorious for buying deeds sight unseen, and figuring out the problems after. But we're talking about a $500,000 property. It probably has encumbrances on it, liens, whatever, mortgages, but I'm buying the deed for $5,000. So for me, I'm willing to take that risk. To anyone watching, by the way, that is something that I worked up to. That is not where I started. So that is definitely an and one play. It's not a beginner layup play,
I'm thinking of a story right now where we found out a house had $8 million in federal IRS judgments on it. And It was like a $300,000 house. And so in that case, I'm going to tell this story for those of you that are listening. It is a very ballsy move to go and just buy that house, even if it's for $5,000, because you could be buying $8 million in federal IRS liens attached to that house as well.
I've ended up with a lot of deeds throughout the 7 years of my career. My saving grace was always, I could use it as tax write-offs because I'll depreciate the property. So I have done that. So I've always gotten the benefit out. Usually, for the record, and again, just full disclosure here for anyone who's listening, I'm usually able to pull at least a title search, and then we do manual searches. So we have a pretty good idea, probably 75%, confidence on what we're getting into. It's rare that I buy something blind. I did it the other day, but I felt very confident we ended up being right. So
good. Yeah, it is rare. Honestly, you guys, I've seen that one time in the thousands of transactions I've seen come across my desk. So I've only seen those huge, large IRS, and it had already been past the 10-year period of time. So I think they had technically probably already been, I don't know how, I don't think they get completely relieved of it, but they'd already been like, they couldn't be attached to the house anymore and they couldn't take anything from the house at that point.
It's like the statute of limitations pretty much.
Yeah.
Well, listen, clearly we can talk about everything, but before we get into that, obviously you've been working with Pace now for, you said about 2 years, right?
Yes. Yep. It was November of 2021.
Perfect. So let's backtrack before we get there. Clearly, I mean, I've taken a look at what you guys are doing. I've spoken to Pace about it. I mean, you guys are crushing it, but you have a very voluminous, type of business. I mean, there's a lot of transactions, I'm sure, that you guys do every single year, but where did you start? Like, how did you get from there, wherever there was, to here?
So I'm actually an entrepreneur. I have owned multiple automotive businesses. I still own automotive businesses with my husband. And a couple of sets of our shops, we had some issues with where we were renting. And so this was in 2019. We had to close down a couple of our shops and kind of take a reprieve away from the industry. This was also right before COVID. And so it was before that, but it was late in 2019. And so when that happened, I kind of had to shift directions. I'd already been doing real estate as a traditional real estate agent since 2015. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to lean into real estate. Well, then I met Gene Guarino.
Okay.
And Gene Guarino, unfortunately passed away in 2021. And I had been working for him for almost 3 years at that point in time. And they kind of restructured their organization. And I still am super close with their family, but I ultimately lost my job that I had there. So I was still doing traditional real estate, but not really heavy. Like I wasn't a super crazy high level real estate agent. I was just doing it for friends and family and making an extra, $50,000 to $75,000 a year. Right. And so I've always had this mentality of like, I have my entrepreneur stuff and then I have this other stuff that I do. I'm always doing multiple things. And someone actually recommended me to Pace in 2021 as an operator for his wholesale company. And so he called me randomly on a Sunday night.
Very Pace-like. Sure.
My name's Pace Morby. I have a show on A&E. I have this. And I was like, what is this? What is going on? It was so bizarre. It was weird, but I was like, I've never talked to somebody like this. And he did feel a lot like Gene, and Gene obviously was a mentor and had a group that I worked with for 3 years before that. And so once he found out that I worked for Gene, he was like, I need you to come work for me and I need you to come to my office tomorrow. And I was like, it's the holidays. Like, I think I might not even work. I didn't need to work. I had our businesses, so I was like, I don't know if I'll take on another thing. Like, I'm interested in talking to you, but maybe not. And I think that made it worse for him. He was like, no, now I really need you to work for me. So I was like, dude, I don't know anything about wholesaling. And I don't know what the SubTo thing is. That sounds illegal. I don't know anything about this. I don't want to do that. So he's like, no, just meet with me and my partner. Well, we met the next day and then I just started working for him from there on out.
I love it. And what year was this?
2021.
2021. What changed your mentality around that decision?
I'm the type of person, the reason I am, so to give you just a quick, huge background of where I'm at, I actually have a degree in genetics. I went to school to be an engineer. And then I have a degree in genetics and I was going to be a veterinarian. Wow. And instead of becoming a veterinarian, I decided I would like to raise my family. I had a young family at the time and my husband and I started our businesses. And so I got my real estate license as I'll use this as a way to get us through as well and kind of just keep us going. So I always knew that I wanted to be able to be at home and be with my kids and have flexibility and do all of that. And going down the path of becoming a veterinarian, I don't think I would have had that, right? So I made a choice at that point in time to not go down that path. So I've had this really long winding path of just what feels right. I'm going to say yes to opportunities as they come along, but I'm going to feel them out. So I'm very much so how does the energy of the room feel type of a person. So I think for Pace, when he came in, it wasn't that I was hungry for money or the industry or to be known. I think some people come into this world and into Pace's world specifically because they want to become a Pace.
Yeah.
Right. Or they want that fame. They want this, they want that. And I didn't have that. It was more so this is interesting and it's an opportunity on the table and I still can work flexibly in a way and I can still do everything I need to do. And I feel like I could learn some things here. And that's more so what I like to do is I like to step into opportunities to learn. So that's what changed my mind. I was like, I'm interested, but I don't know if I'll stay here. And I told him that up front.
Wow, that's awesome. I mean, you couldn't have ended up knowing Pace and being friends with him. You couldn't have ended up with a better individual to really just be like, here it is. And
it's so weird because some of the first times I would go, it was before we had an office, and I obviously don't work in that office now, but I did for about a year. We were at his house. We would work out of his home office, right? And so I would go to his house with everybody and we'd work out of his house for the first couple of weeks I was there. And people would come over and be starstruck. And I was like, what is going, because I had no idea who he was. I had I'd never seen the TV show. I just did not like that. I'm not on social media, really. I don't do a bunch of that. So it was very bizarre for me. But then I caught on to why maybe he wanted me to work there so much was because I didn't have that mentality of this is it. This is what's going to make it big for me. It was more so you seem cool. I guess we can try this out. It wasn't about me wanting to be there to be him,
Right. Well, I think a lot of people, even when it had been years since I had seen him, because we've both been busy or whatever. And we ran into each other last year at the family mastermind. And he was like, yo, because I had changed so much. I looked physically different. I didn't have a beard back then. Like, I was 26, 27. Now I'm 33. He had aged too, right? Like he had changed. And now he was, the Pace Morby that we all know. And we just hugged it out. We're like, damn, dude, where you been? He's like, man, you've been hitting the gym. And I was like, yeah, dude. Yeah. He's like, I'm still thin. I was like, yep, look the same. So, but it was cool, man, because I saw so many people, and then people were even walking up to me and be like, how do you know Pace? How long do you know Pace?
Isn't that weird?
And I'm like, well, yeah, it's been a long time. We've known each other for quite a bit,
It is so weird. What's funny is the other day he texted me really early in the morning, and he knows if I text him back early in the morning, it's because I went to the gym. And I could tell by the way we're such brother sister now. So he texted me about something related to work, and I answered right away. And it was like 5:30 in the morning. And he goes, did you go to the gym? And I was like, yeah, I'm on my way there right now. And I could just tell, like, by the way he asked it, that it was like instant, like, I'm going to go to the gym. Like, this is my sign to go to the gym right now. So it's funny that you said that, because he always is trying to conscientiously go to the gym, but instead he works instead of going to the gym. So he needs to get better at that for sure. But
even when we did our podcast, it was on a Saturday, and I believe it was 7:30 a.m. his time, 9:30 a.m. my time. And he showed up early, and I said it on my podcast, and I said, like, this is one of the reasons why we jive so well, but this is also one of the reasons why I know you don't need to hear it, but this is why you have the success that you do, because you show up anytime, any place, always fully intention. And you're you're a beast at what you do. You're really, really, really hard worker. I mean, apart from being smart and being a good dude and just emanates the right energy and the right message and all that, but I've been hard pressed to find somebody who genuinely cares as much as Pace does about the community, about people, about what he wants to teach. And I mean, he's almost like a messiah, if you will, like behind his messaging. And he's like, yeah, no, I want to take the people there. So, even me with the Latino population, I've taken on some of that because I've been around guys like Pace for so many years. So I respect it. And I'm bringing that same message, like, hey, like, I want to take the people there because I've done it. So let's all go. Right. So I think that there's a lot to be said there.
Yeah, it's almost to a fault to a certain extent. And this will probably get us into the story of how I ended up at transaction coordination. But long story short, the wholesale business was really probably on its tail end when I came in, and the partnership that he had there was not really going that well. And so it was only a couple of months before it was like, hey, we're going to shut this down. You don't even need to be wholesaling anymore. I don't even know why you're wholesaling, because you're just buying deals, like you said, for tax benefits. And he had the show, and he had the students, he had all this stuff. And so I think he thought that he needed to continue to wholesale to be able to teach that aspect to people. And I'm like, you're still teaching them without needing, you don't need to do it. Just because you're not doing it, you've expanded and elevated. You need to show them what that progression looks like, not keep doing all the things.
Agreed.
So we stopped doing wholesaling. And at that point I was like, okay, I got to figure out where I belong in this industry then, like in this space. And if this isn't the path that I should be on, then that's okay. I mean, I wasn't 100% committed to staying there. I was like, I'm here to help and have the opportunity. But what ended up happening is I moved away from his partnership in the wholesale business. And he asked me one day, he's like, can you help me with a transaction in Texas? It's been going on for a little while. Well, what I realized is the transaction had been going on for 3 months, and it had a buyer, which was Pace, and a seller who was one of the students in his group that was in a hard spot. They had a bunch of liens on a property. They did have an underlying loan that we would have taken over subject to. And I had never done a subject to transaction before. And so this was the first time that I was like, okay, I got to figure this out and get into here, because once again, I had no training. I hadn't been taught. I didn't watch his course. I didn't do any of that. I was like, I'll just figure this out. Right. So we get into it, and I start looking at it, and I'm like, your entry fee on your contract is half of what it would be now, because there's so many more liens, and the amount of the liens in the last 3 months have just gotten higher and higher and higher. And I was like, I don't think you should close on this deal. Meanwhile, like what you just said, Pace is so committed and so loyal to people that he was like, no, we're closing on it. And I was like, no, you're not. And I don't think he ever has people do that to him, And he's like, well, why? And I listed all the reasons why. And I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. And yes, I'm not an expert on this, but I do know real estate. And I still just can't make the numbers make sense here. So this doesn't make sense. So if you're only doing it to help this person's not willing to help themselves. And they're just letting these things stack up and not deal with it because they're like, Pace will save me. And so that's the wrong mentality to teach your students as well. And he was like, okay, well, are you going to tell them that? And I was like, yeah, I don't care. Like, I'll be the bad guy.
No
From
problem.
then on, we were good cop, bad cop, right? So he's always good cop. I'm always bad cop. And this is what this evolution of like, I'm in his world operationally, and now I oversee a team of transaction coordinators, but I was also transaction coordinating for a good period of our time together. And it was more so he would get into a deal, it would be brought to me, and I would say, here's all the things that are wrong with it. I could potentially see a silver lining here. If you really want it, I'll go through with it as long as these things happen. If you don't like what I'm saying, then I think we should cancel on this. So there's a lot of that relationship going on here. And since I started with him, I think he's purchased over 2,000 doors, just adding myself. And then now I have a team of like 5 or 6 people. Actually, no, I think I have a team of almost 10 now, including VAs.
So let's dig it. Now we got the pass. I appreciate that. So let's dig into that because look, I have a transaction coordinator, which is in-house. They're a virtual assistant. We've trained them up ourselves, probably 500 plus transactions in my career. So I've definitely seen my fair share of, oh shit, this is good, this is bad, this is a checklist. And we have SOPs built out for this. For anybody listening to this, a transaction coordinator is, in my definition, I'm interested to hear yours, but my definition is a transaction coordinator is really the glue that keeps the deal together with the buyer side and the seller side and make sure that all timelines, all paperwork, all necessary checkpoints are met in order to successfully close on the deal.
I always tell people, and my marketing team likes to describe it as a maestro of an orchestra, right? All the notes are played at the right time. All of the instruments are put together correctly. But I like to explain it as a nanny, right? Like I didn't make the kids. It's not my contract, right? And I don't need to take care of them long term, but I need to make sure they stay alive and they are in good health by the time they get back to their parent, So for me, from the time a transaction gets with my team, number one, we want to make sure it goes as efficiently as possible. So we have processes in place like you were talking about and procedures that we expand on and we improve all the time, especially because now I have 550 of my own students that are top tier TCs. So we've created
550.
I have 550 students. We launched last July. So July of 2023, and we have 550 students at this point in time, some of which have gone, which is so crazy to me. They joined my community and then joined Pace's communities, his other ones, because people wouldn't consider my community Pace's, even though we are partnered on it, because I'm mainly the front face on it. But I do think it's so interesting because I used to see it the opposite, right? Like people who were in SubTo and his Gator community, they would then join top tier. Now it's the opposite. I have people coming from the outside joining top tier and then saying, hey, I think I want to join SubTo and Gator as well. So we have this like collective communities of creative finance or lending or whatever it may be. And I don't know exactly where I was going with this, but it's been a fascinating freaking journey to get to where we are today.
Oh, I can only imagine. So let's like expand on this. So I want to chop this up and because I'm getting excited, but all right. Yeah. So for the people watching, in your words, what are probably the most important traits that a good TC should have?
Yeah. Well, attention to detail. A love for organization and checklists and spreadsheets, like you're saying, right? So people who love working in platforms like Monday.com, I started in Trello, so I also love Trello. Honestly, a lot of people who have real estate experience, so people who were agents, maybe like me, where they did, I don't know, I've probably done 50 transactions in my existence of having, a real estate license. They aren't crazy active. They don't necessarily love the front end sales aspect of being a real estate agent, but they love making sure that people have what they need. So for me, to this day, I still get clients that are my traditional real estate clients calling me or texting me saying, I don't know where my septic system is at my house. Can you tell me? And you want to know what the most satisfying thing for me is? I can go right back to my file. It's perfectly organized. I can pull up their septic inspection, send them a picture of it and be like, it's right in front of your front room, just out in front of your house. And they're like, it's been 2 years since I talked to you. And you always save me for everything, And it's just, that is what's so satisfying. And what people who are devaluing transaction coordinators, in other words, they don't necessarily see the value, don't understand, is that in order for you to scale and grow, you have to sort of be chaotic, right? You have to be out there grabbing all the deals you possibly can, getting all the things done. And you have to have somebody that's like sort of the devil on your shoulder that's like, this one looks fun. Like we should do that one. And this one's a little messy. It's a little crazy, but I'm going to keep all this documented. If you still want to move forward, I'm here, but I've got everything documented in case things go really sideways, Yeah. And then when you get to the end of it, you can feel comfortable knowing that your final folder of all of your documents that have been executed, and I even do extra bells and whistles of documents that we put in there that I teach my students because I've seen it firsthand from an operations perspective. When I came into Pace's world, he didn't really have a committed transaction coordinator to any of the deals he'd done up until that point. And so when I would go back to look for documents to just clarify what the deal was, I couldn't find them. I didn't know who was the wholesaler, who was the title company we used, I didn't know because the contracts from whoever he bought them for weren't that great. And then the file itself didn't have very much information in it. And I was like, this is what you really need. You need somebody making sure your documentation process is on point. And that's what I did. That's what I turned his whole world into.
Well, I think it's very classic entrepreneur visionary, like I am, like Pace is. I know I do it with my team. I have a tendency to run through walls at 1,000,000 miles an hour. And then I'm thinking my team is right there. When in reality, they might be about 10 walls behind me. And I'm like, well, what happened? And they're like, you're a nut job. What are you doing? Yeah. That's what happened. You're a nut job. But then guys like Pace and I really need that structure and need that person because like my girlfriend, she's in my business. She is extremely well organized. She's extremely like, tell me this, tell me that, tell me this, tell me that. And then that goes to here and they get it. Me, I'm just like, do the deal. Done.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's it.
Pace will tell people all the time. So I get this same email. Pace sent me a message on IG and said he'd buy this deal. Number one, that's not usually what he said. They're just being optimistic, right?
Yeah.
So those of you who think that's what he said, you're going to get sent to me and then I'm going to actually verify that that's a real thing that we're doing. And I'm going to be the one that decides whether we actually buy it because I'm going to vet everything you just said. Because if he sends you something, very unlikely he's going and comping it and looking at the details and doing all those things. And that's not something a transaction coordinator does. So I'm not saying that's a TC's job. I'm just talking about it from an operations perspective. I'll vet it and then I'll hand it off to a transaction coordinator so they can take that ball and run it to the end zone. But it really is interesting how, people who are of the personality type like your girlfriend and myself and all of my transaction coordinators, we tend to instinctually be turned off by the chaotic thing. Like, oh yeah. God, why are you doing that? Right. But that is where you make your money as a transaction coordinator. You need those people in order to quiet that chaos, in order to organize that mess so that they can do what they do best and you can do what you do best. And so you just have to figure out where each other's boundaries are. And if you're running too fast, you have to communicate. If the other person is being too negative Nancy for you, you have to communicate about it, whatever it may be. But you have to have that yin and yang. And it really kind of goes back to rocket fuel, which is the integrator and the visionary, right? Where it's like you have this person who has a completely different personality type than you. And in order to balance each other, that's how you get to where you want to go. That's how you get to the moon if you wanted to go to the moon,
Yeah. Well, yeah, guys like Pace and I would, we would run chaos forever and we would do a lot of stuff and we would make a lot of money and we would do a ton of deals, right? Even though we do it differently. But we would not have organization. Like it's something that we don't think of. Like I could seriously tell you, I know what I want done. I know to go grab it because I've done that so much in my career. And that's awesome because I have amazing drive and a motor just like Pace that there's no stopping me. But yeah, no, the older I've gotten and the more seasoned I've gotten in bad partnerships, good partnerships, all that, you need that stability and you need somebody to be like, listen, Turbo, take it easy. It sounds great. And I know you want to conquer the world. However, we need to do this, and that. And this deal's crazy because of this. And usually I'm like, oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Yeah. And you guys have like the big concepts of it. It's like, so people will come to me and other visionaries, right? People who need transaction coordinators, and they'll be like, well, Pace said when I negotiated with my seller that if we transfer the deed, that if I default, they can just automatically get it back. And I'm like, well, depending on the state and the regulations in that state, depending on all these things you don't want to hear somebody say, right? So he says what is true, right? That's true. It is. We can definitely get that to happen. The mechanisms by which that happens after the fact, the minutia behind that is what transaction coordinators are here to say, hey, yes, we could potentially make that happen. Yes, we need to talk to an attorney and decide how that needs to be worded in your contracts, if it's even possible, or explain to the seller how that would work if there was a default that occurred, right? And so that's something that I do feel like people are always a little bit shocked when they run to their first deal and they just think it's going to be so simple and easy and it's going to be great. And then they come to us transaction coordinators and I'm like, well, there's $100,000 in additional liens on your title report. And they're like, what title report? What do you mean? What's title insurance? Like all this stuff. And it's like,
yeah.
Well, these are the realities of real estate transactions. And just so you know, you're not alone. I have 5 other files right now with extra liens that people weren't expecting to have on them, and so then they're like, oh, okay. But it is really interesting how people expect things to go when they've never been in real estate. And then I have the sobering reality conversations with them when they get into transactions with us. And it's hard because sometimes it becomes the transaction coordinator's fault, right? Where they're like, you're just being negative or you're not, whatever, I still want to do the deal. And it's like, no matter how bad it gets, I call them the hopeless romantics. And I would say the wholesalers of the world are the worst hopeless romantics I have ever met in my life. They're all in really bad relationships with really bad homes that they are destined to fix, when in all reality, many of them cannot be fixed and they should break up.
Oh, damn. You know what? That is going to be a reel that's going to replay on my Instagram. And I'm going to tag you on it because that was probably an amazing way to put it, because it's true. And, me having students myself on the wholesale side, man, I get it. When I was newer, I would get a deal and it's like square peg, a round hole till it just fits and it's going to happen. And there is a certain aspect, which is, obviously that's the entrepreneur in me, which is like, oh, I can fix this. And I knew it was going to be hard. But I tell my students, I'm like, look, you have to know when to pull the parachute cord and when to not. You can't just keep free falling because eventually you're going to smack right onto the ground and there goes that. And you also have to worry, you have to be and this comes with experience, unless you have a mentor or something. But that's why a mentor is so important, because they can shine light before you even see that. Something that might take you 2 years to shine light on, they could do it in 2 days, right? And that's because they have been there before. So for me, I tell them, I'm like, look, I know you think that this deal is going to make you 30 grand, but the reality is it's not. And the amount of work and time and headache to resolve this deal, you're better suited going and finding 5 more deals that are less complicated than this. And I guarantee you, I know it's counterintuitive, because you think you have a bird in hand, but in reality, what you have is a pile of shit in hand that, let's be candid, you can't fix this one. And they're not all, I have deeds that I own, like we just spoke about. There's one of them that you've been dealing with them for 3 years and it's a double short sale, triple probate, whatever. And I just have the deed in a land trust. And I'm just like, it's been a great tax write-off for me. That's about as far as that deal's going to go. I know it. It would be 50 years before the equity position caught up to where that deal wouldn't be upside down. You understand? Plus,
but see, only you and Pace and those types of people that have reached that level could actually benefit from that. And, and this isn't something a transaction coordinator does. I do sit in multiple roles, guys. So I will try and differentiate between when I'm talking about transaction coordination, when I'm talking about, an operations role, which I will talk about how we teach both in my program.
Yeah, let's get into that. Go ahead.
So it is difficult because people will come to me, right? And when I'm sitting in the operations role related to SubTo, which is our mentorship for people who are wholesalers and things like that, they'll want us to look at deals that they want us to transaction coordinate before I hand it to a transaction coordinator. And I'll say, hey, you're looking like you're going to lose $1,000 a month on this deal. Why? Do you have tax burden? Do you have things that you need to do this for? Like, why buy this property? And sometimes on a very rare occasion, they will have a good reason. Well, I want to move into it, right? Like, I just want to live in it. And it's in a neighborhood where I want my kid to go to school, whatever, right? Totally fine.
Cool.
Or they're like, I want to rent it. And I'm like, okay, well, that makes no sense. So explain to me, but it goes back to the helpless romantic. Well, I just wanted the deal. And this is the first one that came to the table. And so it is very, very difficult. And I've learned now to teach my transaction coordinators, who are the unsung heroes, the people who are babysitting these transactions, how they can step into an operator role where that conversation might be appropriate with the person you're working with. And you can elevate your role and get into even higher level of an existence for your career. Because transaction coordination, although you could run a transaction coordination business where you make well over 6 figures a year and you have a team that works with you and you have turned it into its own little machine, right? It's not for everyone. It is really difficult, right? And I know it makes you sick probably to think about the work that a transaction coordinator does, because it does. It's the minutia. You're in the weeds. You're in all of the problems. You're expected to solve all the things. You're expected to know all the answers, and you're expected to communicate everybody in a timely manner when you're doing 500 things all at the same time. And not everyone can handle that pressure. And so what I do teach within Top Tier is how you can take the skills that you learn as a transaction coordinator and get an entry level position into an investor's world or into the real estate investment world and turn that into, I'm now an operator that could be a COO for somebody's entire investment business, whether they do lending, wholesaling, buy and holds, funds, whatever it is. I have all of that experience. And now we're teaching my students how to step into those roles, whether it's partially and they get contracted partially to help somebody set up their organization processes and train VAs and do all of those things, or whether it's full on, you're now going to hire me as a 6-figure a year C-level employee for your company.
Right. So that does actually make a lot of sense now that you're saying it and I'm thinking of it. A transaction coordinator, no wonder your background is engineering, by the way, because it really is. Your transaction engineering is what you're doing. But a TC, you're saying, has a lot of the same qualities, a lot of the same principles, a lot of the same roles that a director of ops or a COO has.
Yeah, they just
you
don't
found that.
They don't know it. And here's the thing, like, this is a gateway drug, I guess, into it, right? In other words, it's like you jump into here because you're like, I want to make a little bit of extra money. I want to supplement my spouse's income. Maybe I want to just save for retirement. I want to go on a vacation. I want, whatever it is, it's a side thing that you do for a little while. I have a lot of students who still have a W-2 and they do transaction coordination. Some of them step full-time into transaction coordination. And then now I have a whole group of other students who are trying to step into full-time operations, right? They're kind of getting away from TC work. They would oversee other TCs like I do now with Pace, but they step fully into an operations position. And I don't present it that way from like marketing's perspective, because I think people who are naturally inclined to join a course like mine are more so wanting to do just what I said, do this a little bit. They're part-timers. They don't want to, that's most of my community is people who want to just dabble in it, right? And then it spirals and they're like, holy crap, these people really need my help. Like these people that I'm working for need so much more than a transaction coordinator. And they're actually asking for more, but I don't know how to differentiate myself between I'm a transaction coordinator and I actually work for you. So then I teach them how to do that because I've seen that's the natural progression that they take.
Sure. So for me, I've ran it both ways, obviously, as I was scaling up. Today, I have a full-time only dedicated to us VA that we hired full-time. We brought him on. They're only doing our TC work for our JVs, and because we run an education company, we do a lot of joint ventures in the South Florida market, and then I still sit on top as a CEO of a full-time wholesale operation. My mother's a flipper. My girlfriend's in the business with me, so I have both roles, but we get deal flow from both sides, right? We do our own marketing, all that. I've scaled, a big operation down here at one point and then scaled down, scaling back up. So for me, I look at it as I ran the floating TC role, right? That kind of business model. It's great. I think it's awesome. $450, $500 a file, whatever the going rate is today. It's been a long time for me. When I first started, it was $300 a file, but whatever. I'm kind of dating myself in this business. But
yeah, let's go through it after you get done.
Yeah. So do you recommend, is your business more of a floating TC role where you can plug into number of different operators' businesses, or is it both? Do you also place TCs full-time dedicated with somebody?
Yeah, I would say it's both. So right now, the way this looks for me is, we're mainly doing work with the community because I do tell people I ultimately teach creative finance, right? Like the hardest part about the transaction coordination work that I teach and that I do is related to the creative finance transactions that Pace teaches people how to do. They are inherently a lot more work. They have inherently a lot more problems as far as title reports, issues. Usually there's somebody in distress of some kind, sometimes people are in foreclosure, or there's a lot more moving parts to these types of transactions than a traditional cash transaction or even a traditional finance transaction. And you don't have all the checks and balances in place as you normally would. And so the TC is ultimately putting the checks and balances in place that you would have if you had a lender that was there with you. And in some of these situations, you don't even have a title company that's willing to give you a title commitment for insurance because the risk levels of the transactions. So the risk is higher, the work is a lot more. And so what you were just saying about cost, yes, a traditional transaction coordinator, even today in a traditional brokerage setting, probably is making $400 to $500 on a transaction, right? That's probably on average, I would say $400 to $500. And that's probably similar to what one of my TCs would charge for a cash transaction. Now, when we get into creative finance transactions, per transaction, my average is about $1,200 a transaction, but it can go up to over $3,000 a transaction because there's so many different sections to a creative finance transaction. There's your upfront. As soon as they get the deal done, a lot of times I'm doing a consult upfront just to make sure it makes sense because they're so complicated, right? They have all these extra things, all these extra things they're trying to do because they're trying to think creatively, right? So does this even make sense? Is the blueprint you're giving me something that I can read and portray to the title company or closing attorney we're going to work with? Or is it just confusing and everyone's going to get messed up because of how this contract is written? So from the start to the middle where the title report gets pulled and $8 million in IRS lien judgments show up and you have to decide whether that's even negotiable to get off of there.
Sure.
To the end where most of the work actually occurs after closing, because now you have to talk about how I can efficiently take over ownership of the payment of someone else's mortgage, communicate with their bank, make sure the insurance is set up properly, make sure the HOA understands where the bill is supposed to be sent, because now you're a landlord and the bill needs to be sent somewhere else. And that is an inherent problem with these, is that the HOA doesn't understand. They can't just send the bill to the house. And that everything has gone smoothly after closing, so you don't have a due on sale clause called, which is rare, but that's the main thing that people are concerned about subject to transactions is due on sale.
Yeah.
So that process is really 3 separate parts that has 3 separate potential invoices from me as a TC or my team.
That's really good to know, especially because I spoke at a SubTo event, I don't know, a few months ago, but it was Pace's community down here, and I didn't even know. I showed up and it was like, oh, this is a SubTo event. I was like, oh, that's awesome. I've done like 20 creative deals in my career, but I'll talk to you guys about wholesaling. So I was like, this is great. But yeah, a lot of people, I started noticing that. I'm like, man, this is I'm used to doing high transactions on usually the cash wholesale side, creatives here, there, whatever. But I noticed, I was like, man, inherently, this is a lot more difficult. There's a lot more moving pieces. I mean, just whatever way you cut it, I like to use the example of a cash transaction might be like a 50-piece puzzle. You guys are like a 500-piece puzzle.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like it's a puzzle nonetheless, but it's going to be a little bit different for 50 pieces or 500 pieces. But in terms of, so for the people watching, what does a typical SubTo, and I know that's very broad. I know there's a lot of them with, bar aside the $8 million lien ones, but really average typical transaction, SubTo, what kind of documentation are you looking to see?
This is such a good question. So this has actually evolved since I've been in Pace's world. So when I first got into subject to transactions, it was intimidating for me because it was foreign documents that I wouldn't normally see. And state by state, you really have to lean on the closing attorney or whoever you're working with, the attorney with the title company, to make sure you have the appropriate disclosures. Because that's the number one thing. We all know that in real estate. The number one thing real estate professionals get in trouble for is not disclosing properly, right? First way to get the attorney general called on you and for you to get in trouble is to not disclose or to pressure somebody into a transaction they didn't fully understand because they weren't fully disclosed. So we have
if you're licensed. Even
yes.
worse.
Well, and I'm licensed. So I have this weird, in the beginning, I was like, okay, I'm doing real estate transactions, but I'm not using my license, but I am licensed. So I have to disclose that I'm licensed if I'm in that state. It's hard. It's this balance. And so I have learned this careful place where I can teeter totter on, and play in the gray and play in the black and play in the white.
Right.
So, anyways, they would have all their disclosures, right? And those disclosures have been created over experiences from our students, from Pace. I mean, one of our disclosures says you're not drunk, basically, right now, signing this contract.
We have one too for pre-foreclosures. It's a 30 it's a 30 line initial for I'm not high, I'm not drunk, I'm not pressured, I don't have mental issues, I'm fully coherent. And you say it multiple times, but my attorney calls it the CYA addendum. But
yes. So we have 2 of those addendums that go with every single contract. And when I first came in, nobody was using those disclosures because they were concerned about having the conversations that would come up in those disclosures. So I really helped. I will say I personally changed the game for that because I'm like, this is a matter of fact conversation that has to happen in order for you to protect yourself and in order for your seller to know this is right for them. And if you're not doing it, you're doing yourself a disservice. So you have to say it. I run through it very quickly. I have videos within the SubTo community about how to run through it very quickly. But it was something that I first noticed, right? It's like nobody's doing that. They're just getting the contract and they're not disclosing, or they're expecting the title company, who these creative title companies will put their own disclosure in it for their own protection. They're expecting the title company to throw them in at closing, which is so rude. That is so rude.
That's a big no-no. And that's a really, really good point that you just brought up. I always teach that to people. Long story short, I've had students come to me that have been taught by other people in this business. I won't say any names. And they're like, oh, well, he said or she said, just throw those documents into the closing table. And I've stopped them right there. I'm like, listen to me. That shit might fly with somebody else. You're not going to throw a disclosure or a different payoff or this or that the day of closing. First of all, that's super unethical. Second of all, that is the fastest way to either A, ending up in a lawsuit, or blowing up a closing and risking it all over being a man or a woman and just having the conversation up front.
Wasted everyone's time. What people don't understand is that the title company doesn't get paid unless the deal closes. The TC in some cases doesn't get paid or doesn't get fully paid. I teach my TCs to collect a deposit unless the deal closes. And so you're wasting everybody else's time, including the seller, because you didn't want to have a conversation up front. It's so awful. It's such a bad tactic. I don't recommend anybody ever do it. It's bad business. And it is the first way to be considered using deceptive tactics that you could get in trouble for. You could literally have huge fines and potentially jail time for doing something like that. So anyways, that was number 1.
So disclosures, right? Because I'm trying to just keep track of.
Yeah, so I'll go through it all again. So this is where I'm talking about the issues that I saw. The other issue was nobody was securing the sellers for the agreement that they had. They were just transferring deeds.
Oh.
they weren't actually securing the agreement they had with their seller because, the way even title companies, it's still hard to this day. Sometimes I'll run into really old school title companies or closing attorneys who are like, you don't need to do any of security agreements. You're just transferring a deed. You're purchasing it subject to. It's the same. There's already a note in place. I'm like, yeah, but the note is between the seller and the original lender. The note isn't between me and that seller. What happens if I get abducted by aliens as the buyer?
Yeah, there's nothing that securitizes you into the transaction.
What recourse does that seller have? They transferred their deed and now they have no recourse. So that was something I also helped change. So we now, to this day, we have not only a contract that is very clear about what our breakdown is of like what we're taking over and what we're not taking over and what we're paying and what we're not paying. And we have the 2 pages of disclosures, super important, so people understand their mortgage isn't getting paid off. It's still on their credit, that they can't be drunk while they're signing their contract, that kind of stuff. And then in addition to that, we have all of the power of attorney, third-party authorizations, insurance authorizations, and a promissory note and an all-inclusive deed of trust or mortgage document to actually secure the seller and the buyer's agreement. So if there is a problem and a default in the future, I like to formally define what the buyer and seller agreed default even means. Because if you've ever read a deed of trust or a promissory note, it just says default. Okay, well, what does default mean?
Yeah.
One day late? Okay, well, a servicer could have been late. So now all of a sudden they can initiate a foreclosure proceeding for a 1 day late. Nobody would. But you see what I'm saying? It's never clear.
Yeah, very vague. Yeah.
It's very vague. And so we define what default means. We define what the seller's remedies for that default could be, which could include offering a deed in lieu if they like the state of title, because remember, there could be additional liens secured by the new buyer. Or it could include foreclosing on the note that they just created before their actual note for their underlying loan forecloses itself.
Wow.
So
I didn't even think about this stuff.
Yeah, that's something that wasn't happening before. It's something people weren't doing. And it's something I still get pushback to this day on. As far as my TCs tell me, they'll go out and they'll be like, hey, I have an attorney who's like, you don't need to do any of that and we're not drafting it for you. And I'm like, okay, let me get on the phone with them and let's have a real conversation, man to man, right? And people get so nervous about talking to attorneys. And I'm like, tell me why you would not want to draft a promissory note and a deed of trust. Well, because I've been doing this for 40 years. It always starts that way.
Oh, that's the biggest bullshit answer ever.
And I'm like, okay, well, what if I wanted to put this on servicing? What are they servicing? How does the servicer know what they're servicing? They dodge the question, right? Okay, well, and then they'll be like, oh, okay, well, I'll write a promissory note. Okay, well, what about the security? What would the seller do if I disappeared off the face of the planet? And I had an attorney not that long ago go, why do you care so much about the seller? This is what he said. And I was like, excuse me, this is basically a partnership between the buyer and the seller that I'm working with. This seller is willing to leave their mortgage and their credibility on the line for this buyer. That's why I care.
It's a lot of responsibility on the line. And good, thank God you guys are doing good business, because there's a lot of people, and I get it, because I've seen my fair share of, especially in South Florida. South Florida is a sunny place for shady characters. I don't care what anybody says. It's exactly what it is. I'm born and raised here. I will call anybody out on their bullshit. But the reality is there's a lot of shady people, man. And there's a lot of people that I've seen, that I've bought properties from, that other people tried to fraudulently deed over or do some slick shit, try to take out encumbrances against it. I've seen it all. I'm sure you have too. So I commend you for that, because that's A1 business for sure.
Yeah. And I think the best part about it for me is because I am this is the right way to do things. And I have that different mindset, not just like, Pace always compares it to a hunter, not just like kill all the deers and not worry about how they're going to get processed and the meat's not going to go bad. And, like the hunter's not thinking about those processes, right? I'm the one thinking about all of those processes. Because of that, it's actually improved the mentorship as in whole, even though it's not my mentorship. It's improved the processes and the mentality of the people that are in there. Now, I still have some OGs that have probably been in that mentorship way long before I was there that are like, no, this is the way I do things. They're the one trick pony that learns the one way to do things and then they never change their ways.
Sure.
But It is what it is. I always try and educate when I can, and I know that I can't change everybody. So
No, listen, I mean, there's something to be said for that. I had a student recently. He's like, oh, this is how I do it. I'm like, okay, let me know when that lawsuit pops up. I'm like, it's not my fault. I mean, I'm telling you exactly what can happen. Ask me how I know. You want to keep doing it that way. I don't know what you paid me 15 grand for, but I'll take your money. I mean, it is what it is. I told you what to do. You want to drive into that wall, have at it, right? Your airbag doesn't work. I literally just told you.
Oh, since you said it's okay to curse on your thing.
Yes.
The other day, I was trying to explain to my TCs how they can politely say fuck around and find out. And I said, you took a drink right at that moment. Yeah. And I said, you can test that assumption and take note of the results. So when someone comes to you, instead of tell them to go ahead, fuck around and find out, you can test that assumption and take note of the results, right?
That's a really cordial way of saying that. Yeah. Just test it out. Let me know how that goes. Okay. Yeah, no, listen, man, you got to be real careful, especially, I mean, again, wholesale, not to say that it couldn't happen. Yes, there's, exposure and stuff like that. But, you guys are dealing more with federally backed securities. You're dealing with mortgages. You're dealing with Fannie Mae products, Freddie Mac. I mean, you don't know, right? So it's a different level of complexity. I say the same thing to people that are learning novations, right? If you know it, I'm sure you're familiar. Novation is a very hot topic right now. People are like, oh yeah, I'm going to novate it. It's super cool, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, listen, they're very doable. We do them all the time. However, just understand that you're dealing with federally backed things now. You're not dealing with a cash buyer and a cash sale with no mortgage in and out as is transaction. Now you're wholesaling really a property legally through certain mechanisms, like you said, to an end product that is backed by the government. You better make sure your paperwork's in order.
And I actually teach novations a little different. Now with an FHA loan, that's sort of what you're talking about. It is nuanced even differently, but I actually teach something that I call the Molly method for novations, because I try and actually prevent people from doing traditional novations, because I've seen too many people get screwed over where the seller won't sign when you go to close, where they have a memorandum on a property for the amount of money they've put into it, and the government comes in and says, that was a fraudulent memorandum. You can't actually record memorandums on properties and you're screwed. I'm sorry, goodbye. So there's ways to definitely do them. There's ways to do it in a way that's safe for all parties. And as long as you can articulate that, this is the thing. Most people who get into sticky situations, it's because their negotiating tactics up front were bad. The way they explain things, the way they communicate was not good. And so I always tell people, if you're somebody who's afraid of talking about disclosures, if you're somebody who thinks they have to just do exactly what a seller is telling you they're only willing to do, and you're not willing to have hard conversations about the mechanics of how things work, it means, number one, you don't fully understand what you're doing. And number two, your negotiations suck.
Yep.
So you need to go back and learn how to negotiate. And you have to go through those fumbled, I screwed it up, I said the wrong thing. And I've done that too, right? I've sat in an operations position with Pace for long enough. I've negotiated transactions and screwed the whole thing up. So it's just part of it. It's part of doing it. You have to not be afraid that's
I think anytime a lot of people, especially newer people, because there's so much information out there. And I say this all the time to newer people that approach me. I say, look, they're usually falling into a bucket of, oh, well, I want to do subject to, and I want to do flips, and I want to wholesale, and I want to learn novation, and I want to I'm like, see this number right here? This is the number one. Pick one of those fucking things. They're all going to make money. The only difference is the strategies are going to be different. The principles are going to be different. The execution is going to be different. And the frequency or the timeline of making your money is either going to be here on the back end or here on the front end. Wholesale, cash flow. It's usually how it goes. So pick one though, learn it very, very well. Best way to learn something, I'm sure you would agree, is in the field, not in theory, not in books, not with all the degrees that you have hanging on your wall. I can't tell you how many attorneys have more degrees than a thermometer, and they're morons. They don't know what they're doing. So the reality is, do it in the field and become a master of that. The 10,000 hours, put it in. And eventually you bolt on other things, right? The reason why Pace has been so good and Molly's been so good is because in reality, they've done one thing or a subset of one thing very, very well at a very high level, and they've perfected it. Then they're like, oh, you know what? Let's learn novations, or hey, let's do this.
And we have people who want to wholesale creative transaction. That's really popular right now, is wholesaling subject to transactions. And I will say that is one of the most dangerous things that I see out there right now. Because when someone wholesales a creative transaction, they make a relationship with a seller to agree to continue to pay their mortgage. And then they sell that off to somebody that they probably don't really even know. And the likelihood of that person not abiding by the agreement that you made with your seller that you had a relationship with, for them to trust you to let you take over their mortgage payment, is high.
Yeah.
And I see it a lot. And unfortunately, it's one of those things that I wish there was more awareness about. I wish people understood that they should stick to their lane, or they can do this in a different way where they bring that person in and that person gets introduced to the seller. And it's not this wholesaling. For some reason, everybody wants to be secretive. And it goes back to your negotiation tactics suck. You should be disclosing. You should be transparent. And if you're not, somebody's going to get hurt.
Yeah. And again, if for anybody listening to this right now, I know a lot of what we're talking about is transaction coordinating and, SubTos and stuff like that. But if you're wholesaling and you're tying somebody up, do not be that person that ties people up just to tie people up to try to see if you can, sell it. And then last day of your 20-day inspection, you drop a bomb on a seller and you're out. Remember, these people, yes, mistakes happen. Yes, sometimes, deals are unsellable. You contracted something. 10 days later, your lien search came back and you're like, oh shit, this is a problem, or an $8 million lien. Look, it is what it is, right? Certain things happen. That's part of the business, but don't do it the shady way, man, where you're just dropping the bombs on these people. Remember, these people are usually already in a pretty bad position before they met you. Now you just strung them along for 20 days. Now they're in an even worse shitty position. And now they have even less trust when they barely trusted you because life's kind of slapped them around a little bit. And now that's the position that you left them in. All right. And sometimes, not to preach here, but sometimes you could have been the person to change that had you just been honest and open. But sometimes maybe you were their last stop. And now because you did that, they are at the end of the line. Maybe they go to auction. Maybe it's over for them, right? And that was the last chance. Maybe that was the last, stay on their foreclosure or whatever. You don't know. So yeah, there's a lot to be said about ethics like that. And I think it's very important. We'll kind of wrap up with this. You said, correct me if I'm wrong, but you said something about 550 TCs.
Yeah. Okay. 550 creative TCs. So I actually have a cash portion of our course where I teach people who are just interested in learning about transaction coordination. It's like an entry level section of the course. And that is just for cash. We just talk about traditional finance. I could do it with my eyes closed, the super easy part of it, right? But if you want to learn the creative finance aspect, you want to join the actual community and you want to be involved in my live continued education, that's the creative level of the transaction coordination course.
Cool. So these 550 individuals, right? They're trained by you guys, right? Obviously I assume it's all the training there, and then they go out and they're within your organization, or they can go out. And is that a team? Is that a community? What would you call that?
So mine is definitely community. We're obviously coming from Pace. We're community based. We don't like to call them mentorships. I don't even like to call myself a mentor. I'm a leader within my community, right? And somebody else could easily step into my position and be another leader within this community if I ever wanted them to, And so these people are, I try to teach people, especially because the mindset of somebody I talked about a little bit earlier, that is coming in to be a transaction coordinator, it's sometimes the first thing they think is, where can I go get a job? It's W-2 mindset, right? Like it's administrative. I'm an administrative assistant. Where can I go find a job? And I hate that for them because I feel bad. It breaks my heart, right? Like you're thinking about this the wrong way. You're coming here to break yourself of that, yet you get through the course and you instantly think, I need to go find a job. Or the people that do struggle are the people who have that mentality and it's not as easy as they thought it was going to be. So it's a business in a box. It really is, right? Like I'll teach you how to get down the road. I'll teach you the tactics that I know to be successful in this industry. And then you have to go do the work and put the time in to market yourself and prove to people that they should hire you. I can't do that for you. So it is a business. They are their own little entrepreneur. Now I will say I have large teams. I have some students who graduated from the course and they now have teams of 15, 20 other TCs that are also trained from the course that they do all kinds of deals. And that's their prerogative. That's something they like to do. And then I have the lone wolf people who just want to do this on their own and they want to be able to have their own flexibility and control their own schedule and be at home with their kids or whatever it is. And then I have the people who are like, there's 3 of us and together we're going to collaborate together because one of us is good at marketing. One of us is good at being in all the Zooms and learning and continuing education. And the other one's just really good at behind the scenes doing transactions. And so I have a wide variety of eclectic. Somebody the other day called the group the sisterhood with a few nice gentlemen because it does tend to be female based, right? I mean, typically, like I said, the people that are attracted to it are those people who are trying to supplement a spouse's income while they can stay at home with their kids or whatever. So I do have a lot of stay-at-home moms. I have a lot of people who are trying to juggle life while still making money. And then the guys that I have, honestly, I feel like the men that are in the group, and we just started like a men's Zoom. So like a man cave Zoom, because I feel like they needed a place, those, because everybody always calls it, Pace especially. He's so funny. He always talks about transaction coordinators being women. And I'm like, you're excluding a whole group of people who can be transaction coordinators. Don't do that. And they can be great transaction coordinators, but I do think they tend to lean more towards the operator side, right? Like they could come in and probably even more quickly than some of the women in the group take over someone's business and start running operationally because they are inclined on the details side, but they're also ready to kind of just dive in and take things over.
It's funny. This is the first TC I've ever had, my personal TC, that's a male. All of them, there's been 5 up until this point between floaters and a full-time role that were all females. And this one's a male. He tested really well. And like Six Sigma and all that. And I thought he's proven exactly what we thought in the interviews. He's so process driven. It's pretty much the complete opposite of what I am. So that's exactly what I needed. When I watch him, he's like, hey, I know our process was like 10 steps, but I made it 7. I'm hoping that that's okay. And by the way, I added this and I was like,
yeah,
like,
that's great. That's great.
Because if it's up to me, I'd be like, yeah, get the lien search, title search, line up the lender. Bye-bye. Like that would be my training. I'd be like, yeah, no, this is what we do. And you get the guy for X price and then you get Y. And
you got the contract, you got the title report, you got the settlement statement, bing, bang, boom, it's done. I get my money. We're good to go, right?
That's exactly what I do. I'm like, you go, boom, 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 and there you go. And he's like, I don't know what is, but that's not what we're needing to do. We need to do this. But yeah, no, listen, TCs are, I've said it for years. I noticed when we started to hit 100 plus deals a year, that's where we were like, oh my God, like this TC thing needs to be beyond on point. Because think about it. For anybody listening right now, whether you're barely starting out or haven't even gotten started, or you're at scaling, whatever, step of the scale you're at. But think about it. You spend all this money or time, right? Sweat equity, whatever, doing all this marketing, whether it's SubTo or wholesale, whatever. Either way, you got to market to find these leads to convert into deals. So you're spending all this time and money, which is most of your time and money right there. You get this thing under contract, then you sell it to somebody, spend all the time and money there. Now that's your spread. And if you don't have TC lined up, you're going to mess it up and you're going to lose out on all the time and money on both sides and obviously the profit. So to me, TCs is like good tires on a car.
Yeah.
The car could have a badass engine. It could have 600 horsepower. It could have badass windows, 6 seats, the TVs and the AC or whatever. Dude, if you don't have tires, you're not going anywhere. And if you have shitty tires, try driving in the weather. You're going right off and you're hydroplating. So it's really, really important. And that's why, it's a cohesive unit. But I would argue that this is just my opinion, but the second that you start doing 2+ deals a month, you should get a TC.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, for scalability purposes and for the likelihood of closing transactions. So I actually have a title company that's a national title company contacting me right now saying, hey, we have done the math. And basically, if someone doesn't have a properly trained transaction coordinator on their team, they are significantly less. I think they said there's a 60% chance more likely to close the transaction if there's a qualified TC on the file in a creative transaction specifically, because they are so complex. Yes. Because there are so many other nuances, and there's places for the title company to miss things that when you have that extra set of eyes on your side, not only are you looking at it, your TC's looking at it, but also the title company's looking at it. You're just adding that extra layer of protection. And it doesn't mean mistakes won't happen, but it means that you are much more likely to have successful transactions that actually get to the closing table with happy sellers and happy people in the transaction because they've been communicated with all along the way than if you didn't have that TC there.
I agree. I mean, I'm not shocked at that statistic at all. I'm not at all. Just to wrap this up, so where can people find you? Where can people find this community? Because I personally, by the way, I'd love to send my TC to it because I think this would be great for him. So
yeah, no, he'd probably love it. So toptiertc.com is our website. You can go on there. You can learn 2 different options of courses that we have throughout that program. And a little bit about me. I'm not much of I didn't set out, like I said in this podcast, I didn't set out to be a mentor. I'm not trying to be another Pace Morby. So I am starting to work on a YouTube channel and things like that, but that's not where I'm inclined to go. So I don't have a huge presence on social media personally, but we do have a Top Tier TC Facebook and Instagram page where I do educational content related to transaction coordinating and creative transaction coordinating specifically, but it's all under Top Tier TC.
I love it. All right, Molly Tennant, thank you so much. I learned a lot. I know my audience is going to learn a lot. And you definitely, one final question. How many transactions are you guys handling a year, more or less?
Oh, gosh.
It's a roundabout figure. People want to know.
I would say on average, we have probably 30 to 40 in-house. So I have an in-house team, 30 to 40 in-house a month. So times that by 12, that's probably our average. Now, some of those are going to be multifamily transactions. Some of those are going to be RV parks with Pace. Some of those are going to be other types of transactions that are outside of just traditional day-to-day houses. So sometimes there's multiple contracts on those transactions, like what I'm saying. But I would say 30 to 40 on average a month is what we're handling in-house. But I have 550 other students that are also extraordinarily busy. So I actually personally don't try to compete with my students. I have a model that we do internships. So I will do deals with my students similar to you, but I'm not going to go out there and I don't really advertise that we do transaction coordination work for anybody. If I am putting myself out there, it's for me to present my students and the opportunities that they can bring because they're learning from me anyways. So
I love it. I'd love to look. I love what you guys are doing. I think the industry as a whole needs to have this more. No one's really taking the reins on the TC side. Everything's always sexy. Acquisition this, disposition that, operator there, and I do this, but no one's ever been like, hey, you know what? TC, somebody needs to do it because we need to do it. And guys like me, we need it.
Yeah, it's a stereotype. I think honestly, the most heartbreaking thing for me is that I will see people that have negative feedback when I see ads or something like that. And most of the time it's because they say administrative people are notoriously underpaid and overworked. And I would say they're right. They are right. But it doesn't have to be that way. So I'm here to break that mold. I'm here to change the stereotype. And that's not how this is going to be. If you're a top tier TC, you're not going to be an underpaid, overworked, unless you allow that, right? And that's how it works in my world.
I love it. Molly Tennant, everybody. I appreciate you. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much.